Hello, it's Ashley. Welcome and thank you for clicking on my video. This video is a tutorial on how to make this simple bead slippers. So without much more, let's go into it. So you're going to need your slippers. I'm using size 11 because that's the customer's size, and then I'm using 5mm beads. You can use 6 too if you want. Thread and needle. I'm using 0.3 thread. You need a plier, a pair of scissors, and then blade to cut off your excess thread. So that is it. Remember, the size of the beading I make depends on the size of the slippers. So if your slippers is smaller, you're going to be making a small I don't know how to say it. Yeah, so the first row I'm making 13 beads row. So I start with 4 beads. You make a knot, another knot, pull hard to make sure it's really tight, and then you're going to pass your needle through beads, and then you pull to hide the knot in between beads, and then you use the blade and cut off the excess thread out. So you're going to pass the needle through a couple of more beads to far away from where the knot was made. Then you continue with 3 beads. Like I said in my other videos, this process is what we use in most of the things we do in bead making. Like 4 beads, continuing with 3, then 2, the process. So you're going to continue this way till you get to the 13th. Yeah, 13th, because I'm making a size 11, which is another form's 42, size 42. So I'm making the first row of 13 beads. But if you're using a size 10.5, you could be using 11 or 12, and if you are using a size 10 slippers, you'll be using 10 beads for the first row. So you continue till you get to the 13th one. Just adding 3 from the 4. You keep adding 3 till you get to the 13th one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So from the 13th, instead of working straight up like we did, now we'll be working sideways down. So you continue from with 3 beads, and then you're going to continue with 2 more beads. So as we started with the sideways, we've left out the first row of 3 beads. So that's what we're going to be doing. Anytime we get to that part, we're going to leave out the first bead when we get there. So we'll continue putting 2 beads all the way up. So we get there. Now when we get to the top, we want the top leveled. So we're going to I don't know, we're not skipping any beads or leaving any beads out when we get to the top. We want the top in a straight line. So sorry, my thread keeps tangling up. So this is how we want the top, and then we want the down slide. So the top is going to be like that, and then the down will continue sliding that way. So anytime we get there, we'll leave out a bead, but when we get to the top, we don't. So we'll start with another 3 from the top without leaving any bead out there. 3, long thread, and then 2, this will be easier if you know this kind of beading pattern. If you're familiar with this beading pattern, this will be very easy. So 2. With this beading pattern, remember on the first row you start with 4 and then continue with 3, so you get to the number of beads you need, or the length you need. Then the sideways, you always start with 3 and continue with 2 till you get to where you need it to end. So that's how we're going to be continuing with the sideways till we get to the end of it. 3, 2, 2, 2 till we get to it, and then continue again. So we are the 3rd bead. We'll add 2 more, and then 2 more to the 2nd bead, and then leave out the last bead. So on that row, whenever you get there, the last bead, you're going to leave it out, and then you're going to start up again and then leave out the first bead, and then continue with this from the 2nd by adding 3 beads. And then 2. So the down is going to be slide like that, and then the top is going to be straight like that. So whenever we get to the down part, we leave out 1 bead, and then when we are starting from there, we're going to leave out 1 bead again, and then we'll continue. So always, whether you're starting from there or you're ending there, you always leave 1 bead out. That way it keeps sliding down until you get to the end of it. So you're going to continue the process, just leaving out 1 bead when you get to the end, continuing it until you get to a point where there is no other bead to work on. Just leave with 1 bead. So we left out 1 bead again and started with the other one. So it gives us that shape, that slant shape. But remember, you only do that at that point. When you get to the top, you're not leaving out any bead or skipping any bead. You're just going to work through all beads at the top so that you get a straight line at the top. Two more beads. Two. So it's left with 1, and this is the top, so we are not leaving that one out. We'll still work on that one too. So we're going to add 2 beads and work in the last bead. That's it. So we get this straight down there, and then the top is like so. We're just going to continue repeating the same process. Start with 3, continue with 2. At the top you don't leave any bead out, at the end you leave 1 bead out. So continue and then we'll meet here. So here we have 5 beads left, so we'll start with 3, leaving out the first bead. Start with 3 and then continue with 2. Still maintaining the same process, skipping out a bead at the top and then not leaving anything out at the skipping out a bead at the down and then up. You don't leave out a bead, you always work in every bead. So now we will left with 4, so work in the 3 beads and then leave out the last one. So they're left with 2 beads, so work in the 3rd one and then leave out the 4th one. Anytime you do that, the next row decreases. We just worked in 4, so now we have 3 because we left out the 1. We have 3 on this row, so you're going to work So you're going to work in the next 2 beads, leaving out 1, and then because we're leaving out 1, the next row will also decrease. So work in the 2, leaving out 1. So now it has decreased to 2. From 3 it has moved to 2 on a row. So on the 2 we still have 2, so we'll still work on 1 and then still leave out 1. Like I said, until you get to 1 bead you continue working like that. So now we have only 1 bead at the top, so there's nothing to work on. That means we've gotten to the end. So we'll pass our needle through a couple of beads and then we'll make a knot, and then pass it through a couple of beads again and then hide our knots, pulling very hard to make sure our knot is really hidden before we cut off our excess thread. And voila, we're done. So now we have this triangle. Time to stitch it up. So just put it on the slippers like this and then we'll stitch it up. With the stitching, so when you're starting on the road, you started with 4 and then continued with 3, 3, 3. Now when you look at that row, you always have a middle bead on a row. So with the stitching, you're going to be stitching in between the first middle bead on each row. I don't know if it makes sense, but however you do your stitching is still fine, but I prefer stitching in the middle bead because it hides the thread and then it also leaves excess beads at the end to hide the slippers, to cover the slippers well. And then you have to be extra careful whilst stitching because this is where the needle will prick you a lot. So in between middle bead, you prick it down using your plier, pull. and then stitch it up, and then pass it through the same middle bead. You have to be careful or you break your needle, especially if you are using a thin needle like me. I like using the thin needles to stitch because the tips are sharp, so it's easy to break the slippers. But then working with them means being extra careful because it could easily break when you put so much pressure on it. So pass it through the middle bead down and then up to the other side of the middle bead, pass it through the same middle bead, and then next to the other middle bead, the next middle bead, and then you stitch it down again. Stitch down, pass it through the other side, stitch up to the other side of the same middle bead, pass it through the bead again, and then send it all the way to the next middle bead. Yeah, I'm saying middle beads a lot. So I'm going to just go stitch it off camera, and then yeah, we are. Stitching on camera is really harder than I thought. I'm just used to putting it on my labs and then working, but I can't necessarily do that now, can I? So when you get to this point, we're going to add a few more beads. So you start with 3 beads just to hide the slippers a little bit more, but if you don't mind, it's fine, really. But if you want to hide it a little bit more, you just, when you get to this point, you add 3 beads, and then the stitching is still done through the middle bead. So the same process, middle bead up, pass it through the same middle bead, and then you add another 3, pass it through to the next middle bead, stitch down. So when you get to this part, you just add a few, about 4, 5 or 3, however you want, or you can just leave it, it's still fine. So I ended up adding about 4 to mine. So 3 more. Stitch down from the middle bead, stitch up to the other side of the middle bead, pass it through the middle bead, make a knot, pass it through a couple of middle beads, cut off your excess thread, and we're done. So I'm just going to go do the other side off camera. It's hard to stitch it on camera, really. So you just basically be doing the same thing to the other side. Okay, you just do the same thing, stitch through the middle bead down. When you get to the other side, you add the same number you added to the other side. So I added 4 to the other side, so now I'm adding 4 more to the side. Stitch it down, stitch it up. Pass it through, make a knot, pass it through a couple of beads, hide your knot, cut off your excess thread, and then you're done. Seriously, guys, that's it. That's basically all. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, and then subscribe. Thank you. I appreciate it.